So one thing I've definitely noticed in watching Welcome to Wrexham, they actually did a full episode on this particular thing. I may have mentioned before that Welcome to Wrexham is boring and don't watch it. It's not entertaining. But besides that, hooliganism, almost gang affiliated group of people. In Welcome to Wrexham, this lady was in line to become a detective, but because she was dating a guy who was associated with hooliganism, got declined for the job.
Wow,
Like,
that's insane.
so, I mean, I don't really know a lot where it comes from, the deal is. I mean, obviously, I know they do violent stuff, but we got a video here by Jimmy the Giant going over Britain's most hated subculture. Maybe we'll learn a little something today.
This small faction of society has been seen as one of the most controversial subcultures in all of Europe, the football hooligan. Well, before the football hooligan became its own subculture with its own fashion and attitude, violence in football has been there ever since the beginning. Culture with its own
Getting beat up by a bunch of guys dressed like this. You have to like go
Life
home.
would be rough
You have to
that
go
day.
home. You'd have to go home to your family and shit.
fashion and attitude. Violence in football has been there ever since the beginning. Around the late 1800s, football had kind of slipped into the hands of the gentleman, and with that was the
Football got gentrified. That's what he's saying.
introduction of modern football with a rule set called the Cambridge Rule. It was now no longer a sport of the rioting common folk, and instead the sport of the ruling elite. But yet that didn't stop the violence. In the 50s, we would start to see a rise in these young youth subcultures, such as the Teddy Boys. By the 60s, you had the mod
The Teddy Boys got
LMAO.
What the
and rock
Look at them riding mopeds.
as well as skinheads and hippies. Every single week, you and the boys could get together and go and watch your team play. This was an opportunity to get together with the boys and drink and occasionally get into a scrap with the opposing fans. And what started as just a bit of fun towards the late 60s and into the early 70s had really evolved into a class of people who were typically white working class men who would assemble these gangs associated with a football team. These gangs would become very organized and referred to themselves as firms. Some people believe it's in part due to the fact that the elder generation stopped going to football games. As they were becoming wealthier, there were other things for them to do, and football stopped being this family affair that everyone would go and watch, and really became a young man's pastime. And so with no elders...
It's actually kind of interesting. I was watching some Beta Squad videos today.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one where they were like trying to trick a bunch of old people into thinking they were young people. And that was one of the things that when they mentioned it, they sussed out, was that they like football. They're like, oh, that's like something young people do. Which, like, in America, that's not the case with really any sport. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, usually, if you're a fan of football when you're 25, you're going to be a fan of football when you're 45, you know?
Right, exactly. That makes sense.
All we're going for, right, a good game of football, a good punch up and a good piss up. That's all about Millwall.
There's a break from their monotonous lives. Now, when
I mean, I get it, you know? But then, at the root of it, it's a little clip there where it definitely seems like there's a little bit of, oh, keep England English, bro. You know? Yeah. Like, there's a little bit of, it seems like there's a little bit of that streak to it every time when something like this happens in all of human history. So it's like I get it, you know. I've started a good bit of bar scraps and stuff like that, but like, you know.
Sit down and get married. Well, getting married, you're restricted. Can't travel away with a team you love and love, like, you know. I was going to get married, but I knocked it on the head, all over Millwall.
Blood is 40.
before we go further,
Yeah,
just got married.
You should have got married,
Squarespace
brother.
is the number one tool
150 were arrested well away from Stamford Bridge when they ran riot on the London Underground.
into the 70s, and by 1974,
Chelsea,
Manchester
Stamford
United
Bridge.
were relegated into the second division.
Fans on the field again, spilling over from the corner on my right.
In the mid-50s, the European Cup was introduced, and for the first time, English football supporters had a chance to get the boys together, pat their lagers, and head to war overseas.
Whoa.
For Europe, the
Nothing
invasion
go
of
wrong
Mob
there, huh?
brought violence and
Yeah,
destruction.
no way.
For many of the hooligans, these were the most exciting times of their lives.
It was kind of how I imagine the Vikings must have felt going out get into a country and just going absolutely berserk.
And with this, they would
Yeah, again, just feels very motivated.
Strange.
Yeah.
Little strange.
what would the hooligans would start to develop more organized criminal behaviors, such as looting high-end fashion brands. This, in and of itself, would develop a unique fashion for football hooligans, as Gary and the boys would come back to England dressed in the finest after the football games.
They're paying the iron price over football.
This fashion would be dubbed football casuals. The football casuals become very distinct and able to detect, wearing brands like Sergio Tacchini, Fila, Lacoste, Pringles, Stone Island, and many others. It's like the National Front and the British movement. These groups would lurch onto their more tribalist mentality and patriotic nature, and a subsection of hooliganism become linked to far-right extremism.
Where organizations like the National Front would deliberately try to...
It's one of those little funny, totally unsoccer related thing, but it's do you know the Smiths, the band The Smiths?
Yeah.
So their lead singer, a guy, he just goes by Morrissey. You know, he came out and was like, and defended the National Front. And then people were like, oh, well, he didn't really know what the National Front is, you know, and like we're trying to act like he wasn't racist for saying that he defends the National Front, despite them being in the news in UK his entire life.
Right. He knows what they are.
Football firms tend to just represent the attitudes of the town they're from. So if a town is very right-wing or very left-wing, the hooligans will tend to represent that. And so football hooligans weren't inherently far-right.
Bearing now Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister.
1985 was
31 people were injured when Millwall fans went on the rampage before, during and after the match.
Described as one of the worst nights of violence in British football, the Prime Minister is demanding action.
And it turned into a riot that destroyed Luton. 81 people were injured, 60 of those being police officers. 31 arrests were made. Fans tore up the stadium, they destroyed the town, they were smashing people's windows. One police officer suffered a heart attack and had to receive mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, all whilst being kicked in the head by football fans. But it would be on the 29th of May where disaster would strike.
The Heysel Stadium in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, has been a sickening and bewildering sight. As a result, there is for certain serious injury when a wall collapsed, and maybe worse.
Liverpool played
America, that just happens when the owner doesn't give a shit.
Juventus in the European Cup final at the Heysel Stadium, where 39 people would be crushed to death by a wall that collapsed as a result of fighting.
I would like to say to the English people that they are very famous in the world for their education and self-control and so on. We have now the proof that all over in continent, everybody say, don't be like English people.
After Brussels, the world shuts the door on English clubs.
Wow.
Today, the governing body, FIFA, registered their disgust over the events at Brussels by banning English clubs from all internationals.
This ban lasted until 1990, and so the Thatcher-led government set up a war cabinet to tackle football hooligans.
39 people
Along
is
with
crazy.
the Popplewell Committee, many ideas were put forward and laws passed to try and tackle it. You had the Public Order Act in 1986, which permitted
Liverpool
courts to
fans, am I
ban
right?
fans
I
from
know
the
it
Football
was more than
Spectators
that.
Act in 1989 banned
was then.
convicted hooligans from attending. As well, a very scared Danny Dyer did this show called The Real Football Factories.
Mate, you sure we're going to walk in this booze? We're going to end up getting ironed out by this little firm, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you seem sweet as, but it's early days yet, you know what I mean? I'm sure someone's going to glass me anyway. Only joking.
Bless him. Books were being written and
we all went there to show that the English are not hooligans. They're just posers. They're little girls.
Russia seems to have this hatred against England and they want to prove that they're better than us, which led
Shout
to
out.
the UEFA. It has been a bit of an effort to like organize these fights and make them a bit more legitimate, which personally I think is a pretty good idea. All of this has led many psychologists.
That would be kind of hilarious. Imagine just like, it's like, oh yeah, the pre card to the match is just like, oh yeah, we got this firm is gonna put up their 3 best guys against these 3 guys, and they're gonna rumble it out, and then we'll watch the match.
That would be pretty cool.
Someone called Dana White.
Now, what causes football hooliganism can be terrible.
The violence of English football fans brought about the death of 38 people and injuries to 454.
If you enjoyed
Jesus.
this video, please like and subscribe to the channel
454.
and watch this video right
I mean, that's
here.
almost 500 people. Yeah, so that's crazy to think about. almost want to check out the Russian stuff now and just kind of see what that's about, because that seems wild as well. But yeah, so that's Hooligans, and they still exist. They definitely still exist.
Hooligans be wildin'. It's in their name.
They do be hooliganing, for real.
Facts.
But yeah, that's a little bit into hooliganism. I mean, any final thoughts for you?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly knew nothing about any of this, so it really just opens my eyes to how crazy these fans can get. I mean, I know there's such thing as having passion, but eventually they kind of just used their passion for the sport as a reason to just, be a criminal essentially. So
Yeah.
they kind of took it a little too far, clearly.
I mean,
Especially 'cause,
the closest
yeah.
thing we have in America is, like when there's riots after a championship team wins. But really, I feel like that's kind of, I can't really even think of the last time that happened. Like when Denver won the Super Bowl, maybe. I feel like you don't even really hear about that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they may go crazy a little bit. There's going to be arrests for like public intoxication and stuff like that, but like never nothing
I
too
remember
crazy.
like a bunch of guys in Philly getting arrested for like hanging off the street lamps and shit like that.
Right, stuff like they butter the lamps.
Yeah, they butter the lamps. Buttered the lamps. That was hilarious. They buttered the lamps.
That's
Oh,
pretty damn funny.
maybe, and it's kind of, I think they touched on it a little bit about how like, oh, it's not really right wing or left wing. It's kind of tied to the city more. Whereas in America, maybe you're a Denver Broncos fan, but 90% of Denver Broncos, maybe not 90%, but 80% of Denver Broncos fans don't even live in Denver, whereas,
Right.
if you supported if you support Liverpool, you're probably from Liverpool.
Yeah, and and of course some of these clubs are like bigger than where they're from,
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
course. But
a
then,
lot of them
but
aren't.
if you're a hooligan, you're probably originate from that place, essentially.
Yeah. Well,
What
and like specifically on Liverpool, they were talking a little bit about the unemployment rates and stuff like that. Liverpool has always historically been a very working class town, and so I mean, yeah, it would be it would be disproportionately affected. Liverpool is almost the Detroit of of Britain.
Interesting.
So, yeah, super cool video. Shout out again to Jimmy the Giant. Link, of course, will be in the description. And thank you guys for watching. What should we check out next? Like, subscribe.
Peace out.